I do, I'm going to let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm going to let it shine, right? Yes, that's the object. That's what it means to be a light bearer, to bring that light of truth, the truth of your own being, the truth of who you are as a magnificent expression of the one presence and power of God, and to bring that into every situation, right? Wherever you are, guess what? There you are. And wherever you are, there is God. Wherever you are, there is good. And thank goodness we are never without the presence and power of God at work in our lives. So to walk with that kind of consciousness, to walk with that sense of purpose, that wherever I am is the presence and power of God at work. See, when you walk with that kind of a consciousness, with that remembrance of that truth, then there is nothing, no thing, and no one that can keep you down. And so we're grateful that you are here this morning. I truly am. I send love and blessings to all those who wanted to be here and could not be here. I send love and blessings to those that don't even know that they want to be here. To all who have gathered for this divine and sacred appointment. You know, oftentimes my messages come to me in very interesting ways. I'm always asking, well, what should I speak about this Sunday? And sometimes things just come, it's like a download, and I know exactly where I'm going and what I want to speak about. Sometimes it may come through a commercial on TV. I hear a word, and I thought, ooh, something about that word triggers something in me. Or maybe I'm walking and I see a poster, and I say, oh, there's something there that gets triggered, or whatever it is. Or sometimes I don't see anything, I just know. But lately, these past few weeks, I've been seeing an image of a lotus flower. And the last one was actually on one of our new members. And he had on a T-shirt, and I said, that's the third time, like in a week or two, that I've seen an image of a lotus flower on a T-shirt. I've seen it as an emoji. I've seen it in print. And each time I have seen that image, I felt that there's a message here for me. Somehow there's a message in this particular image, and that I should look into it as a symbol. In fact, that it should become a symbol that I use for myself. Now, I don't know where and how I'm supposed to use it. I just know that somehow I'm supposed to be using this symbol for me and for my life. And so naturally, whenever I get what I call a strong hit, or I get some kind of a strong impression about something, you know, when there's a quickening in the spirit, that's what a hit is. A strong hit is when your spirit gets quickened and you get awakened, and it's sort of the universe saying, pay attention, wake up. There's something here for you, so it's a hit. And so whenever I get that, I begin to try to listen in and lean into it and look into it. So I thought, well, let me look up a lotus flower, because we all know that a lotus grows in mud, right? It grows in mud or muddy water. That somehow the beauty of a lotus has its birth and its presence in muddy, murky water. And so I'm thinking, well, how can something so beautiful emerge from something so yucky? And so I went on and I went to Lord Google, and I decided I would figure out what was on the net about it. And so this is what I found. This is from, the writer is Imogene Berthenshaw. And she writes this: the lotus flower is a beautiful flower that can be found all over the world. But the start of this flower's life is not as beautiful as one might imagine. It's unlike many other flowers. When the lotus first begins to sprout, it's underwater, making its home in lakes and ponds, in areas where the water remains fairly still on the surface. But underneath the surface, the lotus is surrounded by mud and muck and by fish and insects and simply dirty, rough conditions. Despite these conditions, the lotus flower maintains strength and pushes aside each of these dirty obstacles as it makes its way to clearer surfaces. At this time, the lotus is still just a stem with only a few leaves and a small flower pod. But in time, the stem continues to grow, and the pod slowly surfaces above the water into the clean air, finally freeing itself from the harsh life conditions below. It is then that the lotus slowly opens, each beautiful petal to the sun, basking in the worldly beauty surrounding it. The lotus flower is ready to take on the world. Despite being born into dark and murky conditions where hope for such beautiful life seems dubious, the lotus grows, rises above adversity. Ironically, this same dirty water washes it clean as it surfaces. As the lotus opens each petal to the air, not a stain or spot of mud remains externally. The inner lotus, too, has never seen a drop of mud or dirty water. It is pure and bright and beautiful. In Buddhism, the bud of the lotus symbolizes potential. The lotus flower represents an awakening, spiritual growth, and enlightenment. Just as the lotus flower emerges from the water clean, the lotus also represents purity of body, speech, and mind. The lotus could be thought of as an awakened mind, which grows naturally toward the warmth and the light of truth, love, and compassion. The lotus may appear fragile on the surface, but it is flexible and strong, securely anchored under the surface of the water. You don't need to be a Buddhist to understand that we are all like the lotus flower. Many of us live in that murky water and never make it to the surface so we can bloom. Many of us are close, but we're just buds, ready and eager to feel the sunshine of life on our skin. No matter which stage of life you are on, I'm sure you can relate to this lotus and see yourself in this story. The conditions that produce beautiful life are not always ideal, but that never stops the lotus from rising through adversity, opening its petals and blossoming in the sun. And I loved that when I came across that, because I said, yes, this is what life is like. We are all lotuses trying to unfurl our petals to really bask in the beauty that lies beneath the surface of anything that we might do in life. And so this is really powerful because we can see that it's about unfolding and spiritually awakening and coming through, but it's also about moving through the muck and the mire of life. Is it not? Yes. And when you think about it, when that lotus flower first begins to sprout, it's underwater. And not even clean water at that. It is submerged under murky, muddy water. Now, who amongst us here has never felt like we were underwater at some point in our lives, right? That we were not only underwater, but that we were stuck in the muck and the mire of life. All of that stuff, whether it's being rejected by somebody you love, whether losing a life partner, or perhaps finding yourself in dire straits financially, or maybe being diagnosed with some terminal illness, whatever it is, we have, whatever the degree, we have all felt like we have been stuck underwater in the muck and the mire of life. And whenever we have found ourselves in those situations, it's been pretty unpleasant, has it not? It's an unpleasant circumstance. It's not a pretty place to be. Now, we've had our pretty places, but we've also had those places where we felt that this is not a place I want to be. But see, usually when we find ourselves on occasion in those places, when you are so submerged and stuck in the muck and the mire, or if you're in that water, the watery places, deep, 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 usually there's no place else to go but up. You know? So sometimes being so far down is not necessarily a bad thing, because you know your next move has to be what? Up. And when you're at that low point, it is then that we will either find our strength of our being when you are at your lowest, or we will drown in our circumstances. We have a choice. And when you're at the lowest point is usually when you make that decision. Remember, I quoted the lady who was lost in the forest in Hawaii, and she said, it was either life or death. She knew it. And she said, I have to choose life. See, we all come, maybe not in those extreme situations, but in our lives, we have choices where we say, am I going to allow myself to be overcome by my situations and my circumstances, to drown in my own lack of understanding, or will I find the strength to rise up? So here's the good news. Because if you ever find yourself somehow stuck or in water or underwater, so to speak, and even if it's dirty water, here's the thing to remember, it's still water. It is still water, and water is not only a symbol, a powerful symbol of life, it is also one of the primary elements of it. Because if you think about it, there are two basic elements for life. You have to have light for growth to take place. And if you don't have light, you have to then have what? Water. Those are two basic elements of life and creation. And so even if you are underwater, it is still a symbol of life. So no matter how muddy the water, how deep the water, how murky the water, you can still find a measure of life within the water. Living waters of truth. No matter how far we sink, there are always some living waters of truth that can help us. I was writing and this morning working on this, and a scripture came. I didn't write it in my notes, but the scripture came when Jesus was talking to the woman at the well. And she had gone to the well, remember, to draw some water. And she went at noontime, which was at the hottest point of the day where most people didn't go. They would go to take water and draw water at the early cool parts of the day. But there was something a little strange about this woman. And so she was there at noontime by herself. Jesus comes to her and asks her for what? A drink of water. Now, this is unusual because a man does not approach a woman in those days and ask for anything. So she's a little suspect, right? And she's like, you asking me for water? Why are you asking me for water? What's up with you? And he's like, if you knew who I was and the power that I had, you'd be asking me to give you a drink of the living waters of which you would never thirst again. And she's like, And he proceeds to tell her, I know everything about you. I know you had 5 husbands. And she's like, ooh. 5. Now look, for her to have 5 husbands, you know she has some mess about her, right? If she had to have 5 husbands in that day, when a woman's worth and life was dependent upon her connection to her husband or to her family, because women weren't out there working and they had to have a family unit. And so for 5 different men, through whatever the circumstances, maybe they all died, I don't know. It doesn't say. But for 5 of them to put her out, she must have had some kind of mess with her. And so she says, if you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for and the waters that I would give you would be living waters where you would never thirst again. And she's like, ooh, give me some of that water, right? Give me some of that water, because water is life. And he's talking about the living waters of truth. He's talking about, you would have something that would be able to sustain you through all your situations and your circumstances, whatever you found yourself in. You'd have something that would make you a better human being, that would feed your soul and nourish your soul and help you to shine and to be, a better version of who you are. Give me some of those waters. And so when we find ourselves in these places, these rough places and these dark places and these still places, you can still tap into that which will heal you. And not only that, you can tap into these living waters of truth that will help you to raise your vibration, to rise above the still waters. Because still waters run deep, right? But the still of the water, usually when there's still waters, it's stagnation. And when water is stagnant, it's ugly, mucky, dirty, stinky. But if you tap into that living aspect of water that it provides, it'll allow you to rise above your situations and your circumstances. This is what it said, that the article said that the lotus flower maintains strength. Even in the midst of all that mud and that muck, it maintains strength and pushes aside each of the dirty obstacles as it makes its way to clearer surfaces. So there's something in us that is stronger than any condition, any circumstance, any situation. But we've got to tap into that. And when we do, we're able to move around the obstacles of life, get around and over and make our way to the surfaces of life. See, when you are submerged in muck and mire and in darkness, you have to look for the light. One of the things that divers do when they're down there looking for the light is the only thing that tells them that is the place to go what? That's up. So when we are stuck and submerged in these places in life, we have got to begin to look for the light, because light is very powerful. We've got water as power, but light is also very powerful. And it can pull and draw anything and everyone into itself. We all know that plants always turn towards what? The light. They always turn towards the light, and there's nothing that can stop that from happening. You can place it in a little corner, but if there's a little light coming through, that plant is going to seek that light and find a way to turn towards it. I've even seen a blade of grass seek and make its way through concrete and cement so that it could somehow find that light that brings light, and so that it could grow, and it could grow upwards towards the light. We've all seen that, where it's going to make its way and push, and it will even crack concrete to get to the light. There's power in that. So what that tells me is that no matter how grim or how dark or how dire, we must always look for and express the light of truth. We must look for the light of truth. Now, I always say this, that everything is not good, but that there is what? Good in everything. And we have to begin to look for the good. So beauty, even beauty can come and grow through muck and mire. There's nothing that can keep it down. So we've got to look for the good. Now, I know that at times it may be hard to be positive when things are looking bleak, right? Because when we're sitting here and things are well, we can say our affirmations, we can say our prayer, I'm a loving child of a loving father, we can sprout all that stuff. But when the rubber hits the road, it may not always be as easy to come up with that, which is why, friends, we have to be practiced Practice in looking for that one thing, or maybe even 2 or more, 3 if you can find them. But practice in looking for that one thing that speaks to the good in your situation and your circumstance. One thing that will speak to the aspect of God. And when you, because there's always something, even in the greatest tragedy, there's some good to be found. And when we find it, we've got to hold on to it. Because don't forget, you're in muck and mire. So you got to hold on to that one thing, that one truth, that one piece of light. You've got to begin to hold on to it, to affirm it, and to express it repeatedly. Even if it's just one thing, one aspect, one goodness of this situation, you repeat it until the light of that truth begins to dawn in your consciousness, or it begins to take root in your consciousness and then causes some kind of shift, some kind of growth, some kind of movement out of the lower vibration into a higher vibration. Because if you can hold on to truth, which is light, that light will pull and draw you to itself. So even if it's one positive statement that you can only find, I don't care, hold on to that and take it deep. Root that into the muck and the mire. And all of a sudden, when the energy of that truth, when the light of that truth begins to stir through the muck and the mire, it will cause you to raise up a little bit, until you are above the surface of all of that. Until you are above and out of your situation and your circumstance. So we make it a practice to look for the good in everything. Look for the good in everything, because that looking for the good will be the light that allows you to bloom. It'll be the light that allows you. And all you need is a ray or two. You don't need the whole sun. You need just a little bit of light. We also know that one candle can what? Light up a whole room. So you just need to look for that one little light. There's a wonderful story in the scriptures about a man who was born blind. And his disciples go to Jesus and they say, when they see the man, they go, Jesus, who sinned this man that he should be born blind? Was it his mother, his father, or whatever? And Jesus gives a very powerful response to this. And it says this: as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been born blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins, Jesus answered. This happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. And some versions say this happened so that the glory of God could be seen in him. So sometimes, your tragedies, your hard things, that's just the optimum moment for the glory of God to begin to show up in your life. He says, we must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming and then no one can work, but while I'm here in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. He told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. Siloam means sent. So the man went and he washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and others who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other, isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying, yes, I am the same one. They asked, well, who healed you? What happened? He told them, the man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and I washed, and now I can see. Where is he now? They asked. I don't know, he replied. When they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made mud and healed him, He put the mud, the Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes and I washed it away and I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man Jesus is not from God, for he's working on the Sabbath. Others said, well, how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see. So they called his parents and they asked him, is this your son? Was he born blind? If so, how can he now see? And his parents replied, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He's old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, he's old enough, ask him. So, for the second time, they called in the man who had been born blind and told him, God should get the glory for this, because we know this man Jesus is a sinner. He said, I don't know whether he's a sinner, the man replied, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see. He's like, that's on y'all, okay? I don't know, that's on you. As for me, I was blind, and now I can see. I don't know nothing about this man, but who cares? I can see, right? So then he says, so they said, but how did he do it? They asked him. He said, they said, how did he heal you? You know, because people wonder, how'd that happen? So they asked him again. He said, look, I told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? Then they cursed him and said, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, and we don't even know where this man comes from. Why, that's very strange, the man replied. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not have done it. You were born a total sinner, they answered him. Are you trying to teach us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man answered, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You have seen him, Jesus said, and he's speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I believe. And the man said, and he began to worship Jesus. Then Jesus told them, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think that they see that they are blind. Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him ask, are you saying we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, Jesus replied. But you remain guilty because you claim you can see. And he's talking about spiritual blindness. Spiritual blindness, not just the physical blindness. And these Pharisees thought that they knew it all and that they could see everything, and they told people that they are the ones who had the great truth, and Jesus said, you're blind. You're thinking I'm the one who's a sinner, but you're blind because you can't see the presence and power of God. It's a very powerful scripture. This man who was born blind now has the ability, after Jesus puts what? Mud on his eyes and tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. Now, Siloam means the one who is sent. It means sent from or sent out of or sending forth or putting away. And metaphysically, what this says is that, after he's blind, he puts some mud. He says, now go and wash. Put away all those things that make you spiritually blind. Put away all your doubts. Put away all your fears. Put away all your concerns. Put away those issues that keep you from blooming and blossoming. Put away all those things that keep you from seeing the beauty of your own soul, because the eyes are the windows of the soul. And sometimes we can't even see our own beauty and our own worth. He's saying, wash all that away, put all that away so that you can see the beauty not only of yourself, but that you can behold the truth that will set you free, that you can see the power of God at work in your life and in your affairs. So this is what we are to do. Place mud on your eyes, the mud that enables you to grow, that muck and the mire, it's okay. And wash it away so that you can behold the truth. And you have to be able to see the truth in every situation and circumstance. There is truth to be found there, even in the muck and the mire. But you've got to begin to see with your inner eyes and not get blinded by everything out here. It doesn't matter what's taking place out here. Work with what is taking place in here. Jesus used that mud to heal the man. The lotus uses mud to gather strength to continue to grow. And we can use our own circumstances, our trying situations, to heal our own lives. If we learn to look, what is the blessing in this situation? What's the beauty here? There's a beauty, there's a blessing and a lesson and a beauty that I can learn from it. As my friend Paul Luftenager said, life is not something that happens to you, but for you. And I love that. It doesn't happen to me, but for me. Every situation is happening for you to bloom, for you to grow, for you to stand in the presence of God and let yourself magnify your glory, God's glory in and through you. Everything is for your purpose to grow and to bloom, even the mud and the muck and the mire. And when you can do that, because you're going to have trials and tribulations in the world, you're going to have stuff, right? Jesus said, in the world there are trials and tribulations, but be of good cheer, for I have what? I've overcome the world. Don't worry about that. Each situation is a petal in that lotus unfolding. Each trying situation is just a petal for you to unfold more and more and more until the end is nothing but glory and beauty. That's our purpose. We are meant to be able to bloom where we're planted and to be able to take strength from every situation. So we want to look for the good and praise it. Look for God and praise it, because when you're looking for that light, that little kernel of light, that is the one thing that's going to pull you up and enable you to grow, to blossom, and to be a beautiful lotus on the beautiful sea of life. So, blessings, happy unfolding. Namaste.